Welcome back. Well, we'll be talking about the State of the Nation address shortly. Now, President Cyril Ramaphosa delivering the SONA with a tone of optimism and some notable interventions on crime and corruption. Our parliamentary correspondent for Business Day, Roos, she'll be joining us shortly to take us through what we saw in the State of the Nation address. And there were some really big things to talk about as well. It was a packed State of the Nation address, and it went on for about 2 hours last night. The president talking about what he's going to be doing. And the big thing is he started with the police. Now, there will be lifestyle audits when it comes to members of the police, the hierarchy of the police, also the Metro Police as well. And you've seen what's happened in the city of Ekurhuleni, where you've had top police officials there implicated in fraud and corruption, also murder as well. We've had one person who's taken his life, another person, he was taken out by gunmen while coming home on a Friday night. So the president really adamant that he is going to get to the bottom of what's happening within the police. He's also said that he's taken note of the Madlanga Commission of Inquiry, and he's seen there that there are certain people implicated. However, there are some names that are missing at the moment. Those parliamentary ad hoc committee meetings, hearings are continuing at the moment, and we're going to come down to a situation where he says he will be taking action. That's the big thing there. So joining us now is Roos. She works with Business Day. She's our parliamentary correspondent. Tara, hi. Good to chat you. Good to have you with us. I've gone through some of the things that were spoken about in the State of the Nation address. My question to you, how was he received by the opposition political parties? I did see one or two people, especially the MK party, shaking their heads, but generally he sort of seemed to get the thumbs up. What was your take?
So going into SONA last night, Business Day spoke to all the leaders of the opposition, and the number one thing they wanted to see was economic growth. They wanted a decisive plan from the president about how he was going to create jobs, how he was going to tackle unemployment, and how he was going to grow the economy. And while we saw very large-scale reforms across the departments, we did not really see a decisive plan coming from the president. He reaffirmed our development into infrastructure. He spoke about how we are going to create more jobs. But the one thing that was missing was a clear timeline. Currently, the only timeline we have is the end of his term, in which he says we will reach that 3% growth target. But unfortunately, many economists are saying now, for South Africa to be able to keep up with our population growth, we need to be at that 4 to 5% economic growth now, not 3% in 3 years.
Gosh, that is so interesting. It's also worrying as well. And you're talking about keeping up with the population. It was interesting to see that the Cooperative Governance Minister and the Water and Sanitation Minister, they were both told to go to Gauteng. Don't attend the State of the Nation address. You've got work to do. He's not pulling his punches, is he?
Absolutely not. I mean, just before the State of the Nation address, the Minister of Water and Sanitation held a briefing in Gauteng to talk about the water crisis in the city of Joburg. And she said it is going to cost 400 billion to replace the crumbling water infrastructure that is currently in Gauteng and causing this water crisis, according to the minister. We saw no discussion of how much money would be allocated to the water crisis last night, but we did see the president now establish another committee to oversee water crises, which he said himself will personally chair to make sure that all communities receive water. Unfortunately, establishing a committee and having a plan doesn't really mean anything without budgetary allocation. So we have the SONA debate next week, and then a week after that we have the budget speech by the Minister of Finance. So that is really where we need to be looking to see how much money is this actually going to be allocated. We know that President Ramaphosa loves his commission of inquiries, he loves to chair a working group, but will this deliver real change? We're going to have to wait and see for budget.
Yeah, that's the big thing as well. The IMF warning this week that our debt ceiling is just getting way too high at the moment. But he has to concentrate on certain projects. The SANDF being sent off to Gauteng and the Western Cape. That was quite significant because our SANDF at the moment, they need money. Their budget needs to be boosted.
So we spoke to Mayor from the city of Cape Town, Lewis, and Premier Alan Winde, who both welcomed the deployment of the SANDF. They both did warn, though, that this is not a long-term solution. It is only but temporary. We look just over January in the Western Cape, there were 45 murders related to gang violence in January alone. Absolutely devastating. But all of these issues are really intertwined. The reason why gang prevalence and gang violence is so high in the Western Cape is because of issues like unemployment. It is because we have about 80,000 students applying to a university that can only take 2,000. So we do not really have these other sectors for young people to go into, and that's why they fall into the victims of gang violence and falling into lives of crime. So it is really an intertwined and interconnected issue. There are many legalities in place because the National Defence Act, it very strictly stipulates what the SANDF is and is not allowed to do. They are only allowed to reinforce SAP's presence, but actual dealing with criminal activity is reliant on SAPS itself. So it is really going to see how the rollout of this plan with the SANDF is going to work, and if communities are also going to be receptive, because the last thing that we want is for more violence to spark out.
Yeah, you're quite right. Speaking of angry people, I was watching last night, as was the rest of the nation. I could see some very angry students there last night.
Yes.
Accommodation not happening. There are problems with NSFAS. The money's not coming through fast enough. And that anger last night. What was said about education? I could see the basic education and higher education ministers sitting there in the gallery as they were referred to. There needs to be some sort of change when it comes to higher education.
Absolutely. We saw higher education students protesting, but also Minister of Basic Education, Sibiwe Gagoube, received many questions last night about learners who are still unplaced. We now find ourselves in February, we're going into March, and there are still thousands of learners across the country who have not been placed in schools. They did say the department is working tirelessly to make sure that all the learners are placed, but sadly it is a big issue, and why the president spoke last night to building more institutions, educational institutions, is because right now we do not have institutional capacity for higher education and for basic education, and it is something that we do need to tackle quite immediately.
Yeah, absolutely. These are some of the things. And then, of course, we had John Steenhuisen there last night as well, who's stepping down as DA leader, or he won't be making himself available, put it that way to be more accurate. But there's foot and mouth disease. And there's been this tug of war between government and the DA to say who the hero is in this whole thing. But yet we've got millions, they say millions of vaccines on their way.
So the difficulty is right now we've only been able to procure 14 million vaccines, and that is not enough for our national herd. Agriculture is a massive sector in South Africa, and it is absolutely devastating the dairy industry, because the sad reality is that while it is not transferable to humans, what happens with the animals itself is that the udders of the cows physically cannot be milked. So that puts the animal in distress. They then have to, unfortunately, end the animal's life, and that creates a big disruption in the dairy industry and in the dairy process. And so we see this massive industry that is now being devastated by this disease. And with the disease being declared a national disaster, hopefully we are going to see more funding be allocated to foot and mouth disease, another issue we need to look at when it comes to the budget. But unfortunately, South Africa, we are not producing the vaccines here. So unlike with COVID, where we had a patent, we had factories, it's not that we can just start a lab tomorrow. So we are really looking at vaccine procurement. It's something that many farmers have come out talking about angrily, saying we've started seeing and dealing with this issue into last year. Why in February have we not started vaccinating already? The department has said that they will deal with all procurement of vaccines and administration of vaccines, but when that is going to start, I think it's going to be the end of Feb. How long it will take to vaccinate the national herd, we're looking at about a 2 to 3 year timeline.
Sure. I started out in my introduction talking about the Madlanga Commission of Inquiry. And where are we with that? Because we've seen this interim report being offered over. But Tara, we're not seeing the bigwigs. We're not seeing, and I'm going to say it, there are allegations against the police minister on special leave, if I can call him that. There are allegations against Senzo Unu. Where are we with this in that whole investigation?
So President Ramaphosa, the only thing he really said on crime yesterday was that it's the biggest threat to our democratic process. Organized crime is the biggest threat, but he did not speak at all to what is going to happen with the former police minister. I think President Ramaphosa welcomed the interim report, and he said that there were prima facie evidence, and he assessed that, and he is waiting for the final report. That is still going to take, I think, about 3 or 4 more months. The other committee has filed for an extension application. So that is the legislative leg of this inquiry. They're looking at another month before they can produce their final report. But I do think this is very strong ground, specifically in Parliament, for the question to be looming: will a motion of no confidence be brought towards Cyril Ramaphosa once the ADA committee finalizes their interim report? I really can't speak to the executive because the Madlanga Commission is going to take many, many more months. But with Parliament at the tail end of their inquiry, it is a question at the forefront of many people's minds, especially with Cyril Ramaphosa not availing himself to come to the committee in order to testify on the allegations and his role in these allegations. But we've seen really damning testimony about what is happening in SAPS under President Ramaphosa's watch. And so I think many South Africans are going to be looking at Parliament and looking at their elected representatives to say, what are you going to do about this?
Yeah, what's going to happen next? I'm loving the fact that lifestyle audits. Last night, the general theme was everybody's getting a lifestyle audit. It's the police, it's the Metro Police, it's water officials. That's not a bad thing.
Absolutely not. And I think it's something that the South African public is welcoming. Also, many government officials. I think there is a very broad blanket stance that all government officials are stealing money. They're all corrupt. I think there are many politicians who are welcoming these lifestyle audits so that their fellow colleagues who they know are committing corruption can be exposed. But it is something we, again, are also going to have to wait and see what the budgetary allocation is, because all of these promises that the president made, they're absolutely lovely. Where the money is going to come from, we're not entirely sure. We do have a very constrained fiscus at the moment. We know that the president has taken VAT off the table. We could see some personal bracket creep with the next financial year coming up, but it all is really dependent on the budget.
Yeah, and it's got to be water. I think Gauteng Premier Panyaza Lesufi, I saw him sitting there last night, but he's got into a little bit of trouble because he was saying, yes, he's also frustrated with these water restrictions. And, you know, he's got to go to a hotel once in a while to bathe. That's what he said. Tara, this has drawn ire from people. The memes on social media are coming through thick and fast.
The memes are comparing him to Maria Antoinette. She said, let them eat cake. He said, let's shower in hotels. I think it was something very tone deaf to say, especially in an election year, especially when in Gauteng, in the city of Joburg, people are dealing with so many service delivery problems. We see residents on the street every single day protesting because they simply have no water. Water is something that is stated in the Constitution. All South Africans are entitled to clean, safe drinking water, and that is not being made readily available. I think the water crisis is something that is going to be a massive talking point for the upcoming election. We did see Panyaza Lesufi and the ANC at large apologize for his comments, saying that it wasn't meant in the tone that he said it was. But I don't think that that is good enough. I think people are really looking towards their elected leaders now to say, are you in touch of the everyday reality that we face here in South Africa? South Africans are dealing with unemployment, crime, economic stagnation, poor service delivery. And they're looking to the elected officials to say, we live two very different lives. What are you really going to do to solve these issues? And more importantly, what are the timelines? We saw President Ramaphosa last night talk about high-speed rail. I believe this is the fourth or fifth time he has mentioned high-speed rail in a SONA. Just after State of the Nation address, I did speak to the minister in the presidency, and she very boldly told me that if the president doesn't deliver on his 2026 SONA promises, she needs to be fired because she needs to foresee that he delivers on those promises. So we're going to have to wait to see if SONA 2026 materializes for South Africa.
But you're right about that. Tara, you are so right, because there is a lack of comparison between 26, 25, 24. And a lot of the opposition parties last night were saying, we've heard this before. We've heard these things. And I'm the first person to stand up and go, I'm inspired. That was a great speech. But we need to take stock of what progress has been made.
Absolutely. Our Business Day did an analysis. We looked at the 10 key promises from SONA 2025 and found that the president only delivered on 3 of them. This was energy stabilization, the removing off of the FATF grey list, and it was some reform into infrastructure. And so we haven't seen really broad-scale reforms from the president. We haven't really seen economic growth. We have not seen unemployment reduction. We have not seen more investment into education. And so all of these concerns, you and I are going to the president to say, we've seen this show before, we've seen this speech before, can you really deliver on it? We're going to have to wait and see. I think many South Africans were very underwhelmed by the speech last night. It was notably very long, the longest speech Cyril Ramaphosa has ever given for his State of the Nation address. He has made many promises, and I think this was very much, it felt like a SONA speech that you give when you just get elected to be president, when you just come into office, and you are so excited for all these reforms and all this change and all this renewal. I think, was it a SONA speech for your 9th SONA? I'm not so sure.
Yeah, all right. Now the 25th of Feb, that's the date for the budget that's coming up soon.
Yes.
Tara Roos, thank you so much. Good to chat to you on Business Lunch. That was Tara Roos, parliamentary correspondent for A Business Day.